On this episode of What's Going On with Shipping, is the Mississippi River a-rising? I'm your host, Sal Mercogliano. Welcome to this episode. So, by special request, I wanted to do an update on the situation on the western rivers. We reported on this a few weeks ago about record low levels on the river impacting barge and towboat operations and the ability to get traffic down below Cairo, Memphis, and Vicksburg on the Mississippi River, and also provides you some background on the importance of the internal waterways to the United States. I always like to make recommendations to you. If you're really interested in a great maritime history of the United States, and particularly on the inland waterways, then check out Alex Rowland's The Way of the Ship. Great book. Does a maritime history of the United States from 1600 to 2000, but it focuses on not just the blue water, but also the brown water. Really important. If you're new to the channel, hey, take a moment, subscribe to the channel, hit the bell, so you'll be alerted about new videos as they come out. All right, let's go ahead and jump into this story. So this is a story from Yahoo News talking about the Mississippi getting a refill from storms and moves cargo once again. And so what we're seeing here is needed rains coming in that are providing relief. Now, this drought that they've been having has showed the river bottom for the first time in areas like Cairo, Illinois, for about 100 years. Matter of fact, we've found a huge amount of shipwrecks and debris on the ocean. It's been really amazing to see. Understand for a second that the reason for this happening has to do with a historic drought that has been hitting the United States. And this drought has been so severe that it has caused the river levels in the Mississippi River and a lot of its tributaries that feed it from the west to go down to serious levels. So Pat Chambers, Chief of Operations in the Mississippi Valley for the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, told Fox News this: "We're seeing the best rises from Cairo, Illinois, all the way down to the Gulf of Mexico. It's about 973 miles of the river from Cairo down to the Gulf. The most recent rains over the last couple of days that we've gotten have raised the gauge reading in Cairo about a foot, which is good relief for us." He continued, "It helps us with our dredging operations and also continue moving traffic along the river." Understand, one of the things the Army Corps of Engineers has been doing is dredging along the main channel to keep the river open. So they've been moving mud out from the bottom of the river along the navigable part of the rivers and dumping them along the banks or shallow water side to keep the river open. The Coast Guard has also been there. They've had to do a lot of work on navigation aids. So as the river level drops, the buoys, which are chained to anchors on the bottom, drift further away, and it makes the channel unclear. So they got to go in, reset the buoys, and when the rivers rise and fall, they're continually doing this. It goes on here, over the next 4 or 5 days, we'll lose about another 3 feet occurred, but then right behind that, we're going to see a 9-foot rise in the river at Cairo based on the rainfall that we're seeing out over the next 6 days. So a big relief that we see coming that way. And if you look at the NOAA map showing the river along there, you'll notice that we got a lot of green dots here all the way down the Mississippi. And that is something we did not have previously. We had a lot of gaps right here from Cairo up here in Illinois, all the way down to about central Mississippi. And we're going to take a look at that in a second in a little bit more detail. But what I want to give you here is a little bit of information about the importance of this trade, because I think it's really important to put the trade that happens on the Mississippi River into some context. So we're going to look at some statistics from the Bureau of Transportation Statistics. So in 2020, basically 165.5 million tons moved between the 12 states touching the upper Mississippi system and Louisiana. And if you look at that freight, how that freight moved, how did you move 165.5 million tons? Well, over half of it, 56%, went by water, 14% by rail, 16% by pipeline, 6% by truck, and 7% by multiple other modes. Where's that coming out of and what it is? Well, most of it is coming right there out of the Midwest. You'll see right there Illinois providing one of the biggest there. Most of the agricultural products that travel down the river are coming out of Illinois, but you're also seeing it out of Kentucky, Indiana, Ohio, Missouri, Iowa, even in high as Minnesota. And then you'll notice that there's freight that's coming up the river. A lot of nitrates, a lot of fertilizer, a lot of supplies come up the river, and you see that down in Louisiana. So what we're seeing here is a vital component in the upper Mississippi River system and their transportation. So a lot of this grain is coming from that upper system, feeding into the lower system. And you'll notice right here, this section from Cairo down to Memphis, this was the area in question that had a lot of problems with the low water levels. And that was basically the cork in the bottle, so to speak. So one of the issues that we saw was that this happened not just this year, but also last year. Water level in the lower river constrained the downbound and upbound freight rates. So when you look at the freight that comes down from the upper Mississippi River down to Lock 27, this is the lowest lock on the Mississippi River. So a lot of people are asking, why is this not happening on the upper Mississippi River? Well, in the upper Mississippi, you have dams and locks, and those maintain the water level there. Below Lock 27 around St. Louis is when the river becomes clear and navigable all the way down. And as the water level drops, you lose the ability to move towboats and barges down there. And so this freight rate is really important because you need to be able to have this. And what happened last year and this year has been right around the peak season. You see the decrease there in rates, whereas in 2020, you were hauling almost 2.5 million tons of cargo in October. In 2021 and again in 2022, you only moved about 500,000 tons. And that obviously has a huge impact on the ability to supply and export our grain and cargo. And so what is making up this grain and cargo that's going down here right now? Well, about 2/3 of it is soybean and about 1/3 is corn. That's what we see heading down at this time. And that is not hitting the world market. And remember, this is a period of time in the world market where Ukraine grain is not coming out in the level that it needs to be. We've seen shortages on other river systems with low water on the Rhine, on the Yangtze, on the Parana. And the world is really in desperate need for this food to get out. What happens when this food can't get out? What happens when all of a sudden you can't transport the necessary food that you need? Well, you see spikes in freight rates. This is the downbound grain barge rates. This is the rate you pay for shipping via barge. Now remember, the standard barge or the standard towboat system that comes down when you go through the locks is typically 15 barges. It's about 15 barges. That's equivalent to about 2.25 trains, almost 1,000 18-wheelers coming through. But when you get below the locks, then you can increase the size of your barge traffic. And a towboat can then push up to 40 barges. However, what happens with the low water is you can't move that number of barges. So you go from moving 40 barges down to 25 barges. Then you put draft restrictions on the barges, where before you may be able to load your barge down to 11 feet. Now you can only load it down to 9 or 9.5 feet. And that means you're losing a lot of cargo, which means space becomes a premium, and that drives up your freight rate. And what you see happen here is very similar to what we saw with Trans-Pacific and Transatlantic ocean freight during COVID, when we saw the huge, massive spike in freight rates. In September of 2022, you see those freight rates jump way above what they normally were. We've seen periodically freight rates jump as high as about $1,000, but now we were almost we were over $2,000 in this case. And such a big jump means that not only is not sufficient amount of food coming through, but the food that is coming through is much more expensive to export. But fortunately, what we've seen is the rise in the river. If you take a look at some of the data coming from the different points, here is the river level at Cairo, according to NOAA, the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, well above low water marks. We don't even see the low water on here, as a matter of fact. So we see that spike coming up, but what we do see is getting closer to Christmas is water levels begin to drop again. That's at Cairo. If you head over here to Memphis, you're seeing that we're just now getting out of that low water stage. We're just coming up with that, with expectations to be out of it right around December 14th or 15th. But again, we see it begin to drop. And then when you get down to Vicksburg, we are well above the low water mark at this point. Not well above, but we're above it. And that means that we're seeing good movement of freight at this time. But the thing to be worried about is if all of a sudden we go through a drought again and we don't have water to fill up the river, we could find ourselves once again restricting towboats and their tows coming down the river. We still got a lot of cargo that's backed up, sitting in silos and waiting to be loaded to come downriver, to be loaded into bulk carriers down in Louisiana for export overseas. So, a quick little update on the Mississippi River. I hope this provided some good information for you and let you know what the status is. When you have questions, please do. This actually came from a viewer asking me to do it, so I wanted to be proactive here and get this out to you. If you enjoyed today's episode, hey, take a moment, subscribe to the channel, hit the bell so you'll be alerted about new videos as they come out. Leave a comment, share it across social media, give it a thumbs up, and if you can, support the page. How do you do that? Well, number one, you can hit that super thanks button below. It allows you to contribute directly to the page, or head on over to Patreon. You become a patron of the page. You can become a monthly, yearly subscriber. I'm getting ready to do my Patreon episode where I'm answering questions from all my patrons. I don't know why I keep saying that. Patrons. Got a great group of questions and a great group of supporters, and I appreciate all they do to help me keep this channel up and running. So until the next episode, this is Sal, signing off.